gentlemen, welcome back to the Think About It channel. Today we're doing an episode of Rehearsal where we're talking to South Jersey and Philly area performers. Today we got something a little different, something a little funny. We have Steve Cooper. Steve Cooper's a stand-up comedian and he's a podcast host based in Marlton, New Jersey. His podcasts CooperTalk and the Coop Tank interview guests in music, comedy, and the acting industries, as well as business owners, respectively. Steve's been producing content on his podcast for over a decade. He recently started a YouTube channel called Coop's Comedy Corner, where he's delivered interviews to the likes of Kate Flannery. You may know her as Meredith from The Office. And additionally, he's written a cookbook because doing what he does is not enough, right? And it's called Stop the Salt. Steve, thank you so much for taking time out of your, I'm sure, immensely busy schedule to do something for the little people today.
Now, anytime you can contribute, I'm like you. There's such a good talent pool in this area, and anytime you can contribute to get the word out, get it out there, you have to take the time because this is my home. I mean, I was in LA for a long time. I was on the West Coast for 25 years, but I'm a South Jersey guy. I mean, Cherry Hill East, Stockton State, now Stockton University. So you always got to give back to the people.
So give us a little bit of bigger background there. You just sprinkled a little bit there, but tell us more about yourself. So you're from the area, and you've had a pretty illustrious career.
I graduated Stockton in 1986 with a degree in business management, but I always wanted to do comedy. My mom told me about this class in Philadelphia called the Learning Annex. So I went to there, took this comedy class. It got me on stage, and I just went on stage whenever I could, man. And I got a job working the door at this old club, Comedy Factory Outlet, because I knew I could watch the great comics perform there. It gave me better stage time because of the thing, and then that just started, and then I just paralleled, and I went on the road, and I was on the road for 7 or 8 years. Then I ended up, what most people do, they end up on the West Coast, and I was in LA for 18 years, 17 years, and I moved back 7 years ago.
Was there something specific about comedy that drew you to it, or it was just something that always resonated with you?
I liked watching comedy when I was younger, and it's so funny. My brother used to listen to Cheech and Chong's wedding album, and I actually got to interview Tommy Chong, and he was lighting up as I was talking to him, and he kept going. He talked for like an hour and 45 minutes. And I usually like to keep my shows to an hour, but I told him, I said, hearing the Cheech and Chong and hearing George Carlin when I was younger, it wasn't so much the material that drew me to it. It was their voices, where there's jumbo shrimp, stuff like that. So I always thought I would do comedy. I mean, in high school, I wasn't the class clown. I would always make the people next to me laugh. So, it was something that I said, I got to try it. So I hit that open mic. I mean, the first time I actually was on stage was at Stockton State College. I was in a Mr. Stockton contest. It was like a Miss America contest for men, but I did it as a joke. And my talent was the Rick Springfield air guitar, and the place went crazy. And I felt that energy, and I went, oh my God. And they say it's like a drug, you get that energy, and it's just, so that's what hooked me. And then I just started working, I watched comedy when I was young. I loved Woody Allen movies. As I said, I would get albums. I had a Lenny Bruce album because I saw it at the discount rack. Some was like $1.98, but I'm like, I don't even know much about Lenny Bruce, but I knew he was a comedian. So I think I always liked it. I think I was drawn to it. And, in my generation, we grew up watching, George Jefferson, All in the Family, MASH, great comedy. And it really affected you. You would watch with your family and laugh, and it really affected you. And it showed how, and I still think this, that laughter is the best medicine. I mean, with all the stuff that's going on in the world right now, I had a show last week, and it was great. I perform a few times a month now, but just people were laughing. When you're on stage and you see that, it's just such an exhilarating feeling because, one, they're liking what you're doing, your creativity. Two, as a friend of mine, a comic, Steve Mazan, told me, our worst night would be someone else's best night, like just to get on stage, even if we're bombing. And that's the thing. That's what draws, and once you get into it, I got out of business for a while, and I dabble in it in LA, but then I don't know, something happened. I don't drive far. I'm only doing shows that are like 20 minutes from my house. I'm not going to, to Oilstown or stuff like that, which I could if I wanted to book them. But yeah, I just think comedy was just something that stuck with me, and it's the thing, it just stays with you, and it's in your blood. And even when you get older, it's like, we're still going to get on stage.
Mm-hmm. And I resonate with a lot of what you said. I'm not a comedian by any stretch of the imagination. But I remember like in high school, staying up late at night and watching Whose Line Is It Anyway with my dad, and just like being in awe of Wayne Brady, not only like how well he could sing, but just like how quick-witted and genuinely funny he was, and still is, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And you watch it, and who doesn't like comedy?
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, people can say I don't like this, I don't like slasher films, I don't like rom-coms, but who just doesn't like comedy? You're not going to find. And if you do, that person is miserable because everyone likes comedy, and when you can supply it to people, it's a good feeling.
What makes up a good comedian? Because a lot of people think they're funny, but what makes necessarily a good comedian?
Being one, you have to have time. It's all in time. Okay, I know. Here's a very funny story. Adam McKay, the Oscar-winning director, who did Anchorman and all them. Me and Adam used to hang out in Philly. He was an amazing writer. He didn't have that great comedy, that timing on stage, but he was just funny. But so he turned from being a comedian into a Oscar winner, as I said. But it's timing, and it's a matter of. And I think sometimes you're either funny or you're not. I hate to say it, but it's like, some people are great at baseball. Some people can hit. I mean, I stink at baseball. I can practice and practice and practice. Still not going to be that good. I think comedy, sometimes it's born into you. Now you can cultivate it and develop it, but you need to have a certain timing, and it's just something you can't learn. But you can take a class to get you into comedy, but then it's just, I think it's inherent a lot of it.
I've sort of found in my life, and I think asking you this question could be a perfect question. Somebody who's been around comedy a long time. I've had people tell me like, "Oh, you're so funny. You should be a comedian." And I say, "I'm not that kind of funny." Like in my mind, there's different kinds of funny. I find like I can be pretty quick-witted with people and say something sort of smart back, but I don't think that would translate to necessarily going on a stage and doing a whole set. So in your mind, are there sort of different types of comedy, or are there like different comedy tools?
Yeah, well, you have to think quick. The one thing about comics are we observe, and I think we observe too much sometimes. Like, you'll sit yourself, you're just looking at a story, you might be out, you might be like on the speed line going to Philly, and you see someone and you're just staring at it. And you're not being disrespectful, it's just you're observing their actions. I think you have to observe, and and the thing is, your comedy changes all the time. We grow, just like a writer grows. I interview a lot of musicians on CooperTalk, and the songs they wrote 20 odd years ago when they were 30 and single and living now it's a different thing. So I think with comedy, you just have to be open to change. You have to be quick on your feet, and you always have to be evolving. I write a lot of stupid jokes on Facebook that I never do on stage, and my tag would be, I'll see myself out. But that's just to keep my flex going, because you run right. I mean, I have so much material I would never do on stage, but I'll tweet it and it's fun. But I think you have to be a good writer. And that's one thing. You have to be a good writer, and you just have to know how to deliver it. And, and you have to be a little, no matter what people say, you're still getting nervous before you go on stage. You have to accept that. You have to learn how to channel that nervousness into positive energy. I mean, because, you can bomb and it can crush you. Even though you could have 9 great shows in a row, that 10th one sucks and you're just like shot. So it's, Comics are, I was talking to someone about this. A lot of comics sit there and they go, "Oh, we're all miserable, we're dark." No, that's not the thing. I have most guys I know pretty funny. I mean, there are a few, but are very dark. But it's a matter of, I think you just have to want to get on stage. You have to be funny, and you have to have the confidence that something will work. I know if a joke is funny or not. Now we're doing it for so long. I also know that some jokes I only find funny, and they may not work. But when you have that confidence, is do it. I mean, that's the worst thing when you're rolling them and you do a bit and you lose them. You have to have the confidence to just get them back. I've told people this, comedians, musicians, actors, we're 50% insecure and we're 50% narcissistic. We want people to look at us. We deserve it. But when they do, we go, why are they looking at us? We don't deserve it. So it's sort of that weird mixture, but it works. And I think if you talk to anyone who's a comic or a writer or a musician, actor, they'll say the same thing. You want the spot. There's a reason why you want the spotlight. And then when you get it, you're like, oh, I deserve it. And you might get some imposter syndrome, stuff like that. I mean, I'll do interviews on CooperTalk and I'll go, man, that interview sucked. And my friend will call me, goes, oh my God, that was such the best interview. Oh, okay. Because it's a very weird dichotomy.
And you never know who it's gonna touch, you know, like you never know, you know, something you might think is not necessarily funny, like somebody might find hilarious, or vice versa. You just never know.
Exactly, and that's the thing. And that's what makes it great too. You know, that's when you see someone who looks so straight, button laced, and they're just laughing at some raunchy stuff, and you're like, oh my god! Like you look and you go, oh, that's so cool. Or when you see someone like a total like he looks like he's like a rocker, a cool guy, and he's like Mr. like no sense of humor. You have to learn, but that's what again, you said. That's what makes comedy great. Everyone has a different sense of humor, but as long as they're laughing, you know, as I say, as long as you get 90% of your stuff hits, you'll be feeling okay. But there will be bad nights. People don't know. You are going to have a bad night. You know, anyone, that's any job. You know, people lose sales deals. They have bad nights. And that's like with comedy. You have a bad night. It's a lot different when you're on stage in front of 100 people and you're sucking compared when you go back to your office after you lost the sale. There's only one person yelling at you. I mean, that's the worst feeling when you have a bad set and you're walking out and the owner's paying you and you feel dirty. You know, you're like, oh, I'm taking this guy's money. And people are looking at you like, well, the jerk up front with his girlfriend's like, oh, I'm funnier than that guy. I'm funnier. So that's the one thing. That's a big downside of it. When you have a bad set, it can be crushing. I luckily, because I don't perform as much anymore, I really don't have as many bad sets. I don't really have bad sets. And I also learned that the crowds that come to my show and the shows I produce, I aim for a age 40 and up, because I do some older references and I book my show accordingly. But yeah, that's the one thing that's a hell that no one wants to go through.
No, not too many disgruntled boyfriends anymore for you?
No, you know, it's like, they're either they're married or they're divorced. You know, it's like the people that come out. You know, it's like, I mean, I noticed in high school, you know, the people I graduated with. I'm on my second marriage. My first was 7. This one now is I've been joining for 6 years. But I noticed like all these people I went to high school with, as soon as their kids got out of college or went to college, they're getting divorced. They're like, you know, I think they raised their kids and they went, man, you know, we really don't like each other. So that's why I get a good divorce call when they come out. I always say, I wish I had single friends, because I know that, and I know from business networking too, because a lot of people I network with come out. And I'm like, God, I wish I had single friends, because I have these women who are divorced. They own businesses. They're good looking. And I'm like, man, I wish I had single friends, but I don't.
Do you have a favorite memory or a favorite gig from your stand-up career?
There's been so many. You know, that's such a hard question. I do remember, though, when I started out, a little bit into my career, I started doing this nerd character called Steve the Stud. And I pulled my pants up real high and I had a bow tie. And I'd be like, are you psyched? Are you psyched? And I go out there and I got to open for Dice Clay. It's right before, as he was blowing up. So I go and it's my first big gig and it's the Comedy Factory outlet. Not sold out. It was like 225 people. And that's like, I got rid of that character down the road. Like, I mean, it was before Screech, it was before Urkel. If I'd stayed with that character, I wouldn't be talking to you because I'd have some mansion in LA. You know, I wouldn't be around. But no, that was something that, you know, I look back and that was like such a big thing, you know, such a big thing. And then just last year, my friend Joe Matarese, who I went to a few years older than me, we went to the same high school. He was headlining City Winery in Philly. And I got to go onto that huge stage and it was a good crowd and I had a great set. And what's great was I went into the green room. They had this amazing green room. It's great charcuterie, you know, whatever you want to drink. So after I got off, I don't drink before I go on stage. When I got off, I drank a nice double bourbon, and they brought me a bottle of wine. And my mother-in-law and my wife were in the crowd. A lot of people I know, and I was looking at pictures of people who have been in that green room, and so many of the musicians have been on my podcast. So I said, I was like, oh wow, John Waits or Dave Wrigley from the English Beat, Graham Parker, they've all been here, and that was pretty big, you know, because to come back and some people were like, I was trying to get in some comedy club. The guy's like, just listen, I just got to knock the rust off of playing City Winery. He's like, how are you doing City? And I said, hey, because I have connections. That was, for instance, coming back, that's been a big, and then after the pandemic, I had started this online network group on the pandemic, and me and Joe Matarese did this show right after the pandemic, it was Valentine's Day weekend. 65 people came to see me. And I was pressured because I had been on stage for a while. And I'm looking at my Fitbit's at like 120, 130, and I'm thinking I'm gonna have a stroke as I'm walking to the stage. It's embarrassing. And when people come to see you, you have to deliver. Because if you don't, they're like, I thought he was funny. Cooper sucks, man. Steve Cooper's not funny at all. So that's in the last few years. That show and City Winery have been two very big highlights for me.
You've mentioned your podcasting. How did you go from such an illustrious comedy career to podcasting?
Well, I wouldn't say it's illustrious. When you're in LA, you take jobs. And I had a job for a while as I was a waiter at this restaurant. Then I became their marketing and event coordinator. So I booked these big parties. And I was involved in the Chamber of Commerce. And some guy I met had an internet radio station. And people I know were getting shows, and they said, you should have Cooper do a show. And I always wanted to do that. I had never interviewed anyone. And so we started out, and I'd do 30 minutes independent music that the station played. It's called indie100.com. And then I could have a guest. So I started getting comedians I knew. And some people were bigger, like Paul F. Tompkins and then Kate O'Kalin, who was the OJ thing. I was getting different guys. And then they let me do a full hour. Every Tuesday I would get to do 2 hours, two different guests, because I was getting like 35 to 50,000 listeners. And so I just said, you know what? I don't want just comics. So I started reaching out to character actors I'd see on TV. And I'd hit them up, and no one was doing podcasts. This was 13 years ago. No one was doing podcasts back then. So they would drive into the studio in Burbank. I lived in Burbank, California, and they would drive in. And I had, Patrick Fabian for Better Call Saul, Ed Asner, and I got these great guests. Kate Flannery, the Coop's Comedy Girl. She did my show like 10 years ago. And so, yeah, it just took off. And then I started getting musicians. And then when, the studio closed, I was doing it out of my house in Burbank. But then when we moved back here, I do it by Zoom. I only do audio. The Coop Tank, which is my business one, is a round table. That's on YouTube. So is Coop's Comedy Corner. But I just started doing it, and I fell in love with it. And I always felt humbled because, I would talk to, I'm a big music fan. I've had 70 members of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Just a few weeks ago, I was talking to Stan Lynch, who was Tom Petty's drummer. We were talking about, unfortunately, 3 days after I recorded, we were talking about Clem Burke, the drummer from Blondie. He was on my show. And I got Clem Burke, who's a Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, because Glenn Matlock from the Sex Pistols did my show, and he set us up. So you get humbled, man. You sit there and you go, I'm a Springsteen fan. I had Stephen Van Zandt. We talked for an hour and 10 minutes. I'm looking like we're looking. I'm like, Stephen Van Zandt. That's the Prados and Springsteen, of course. So
yeah,
I just parlayed into it, and and like I said, in LA, you do different stuff. I was a hand model. I was on an episode of Westworld on NCIS. I was on the Ellen Show twice. I played one of Huey Lewis's News, one of the band members. I played Matt Lauer's Forehead. That's LA. It's so weird. And then I did featured background. I was on an episode of Superstore where all they do is they shoot a close up of me. And when that show, I get probably once a month, someone goes, "Oh my God, we just saw Superstore. That's you." And I said, "Yeah." So, and Silicon Valley, I had a big part in that. So, but not big parts, but it's a feature background where you have the camera on you the whole time, and people go, "Oh, there's Cooper."
That's awesome. You have, I think, 3 different podcasts going right now: CooperTalk, the Coop Tank, and Coop's Comedy Corner.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about each of those? How are they similar? How are they different?
CooperTalk is where I interview celebrities, or character actors. People know. We just talk about the biz, man. We talk about the biz. We talk about life. It just goes anywhere. I don't write questions out. I just go in, I do my research, and I just let it fly. The Coop Tank, I started as one-on-one interviews with people I know, like Tony Luke Jr. and business people. Joe Conklin, I'm friends with. Dave Raymond, the original Philly fanatic. But I said, you know what? I already do an interview show, so I switched it to a round table. So I moderate 3 local business owners. We talk for an hour I have questions, and we talk about motivation and stuff like that. And then Coop's Comedy Corner was just this guy, Jimmy Corhan, out of Comedy Trainwreck in Philly. We were talking. I said, I'd love to do a YouTube show, Coop's Comedy Corner. And there I get comics that have been on CooperTalk. Comics, comedy writers. Like tomorrow I have Gabe Abelson, who wrote for Letterman. And, I know them. The people I put in my show. So we just BS. I talk about their career and how they got started and what was the scene like. And then it just goes, we talk about the creative process. That's just something it's just fun. It's a matter of, and it is a video as CooperTalk, CooperTalk.net is my site, it's only audio. But yeah, they're all interview, but one I moderate, one is sort of just talking to people I knew, like old friends, if they have something to promote. they can come on. And then CooperTalk is where I talk to, the guests that I get, the musicians, actors, and stuff like that. That's more about, that's all about them. That's like I always say, a good host lets his guests talk. And I'm just, I said before, I'm humbled that these people want to come on my show. So of course they can talk. I mean, Tom Arnold was telling me the best stories. I just said, tell me some stories. I was him getting stoned with Hugh Grant and trying to steal silverware out of Madonna's hotel room, like just bizarre stuff. And that's why I go, you know what? Just tell me a story. I was interviewing Timothy Busfield, who was on 30 something and a bunch of other stuff. He's married to Melissa Gilbert, who was in Little House on the Prairie. And all of a sudden I'm talking to him like we are, and she walks by with a basket of laundry. I'm like, that's the stuff. I'm like, and he's like, you know my wife, right? Everyone knows. So it's just, but so they're all just it's all about the creative process and all about, if someone can get some inspiration out of it, or just learn something. If a new actor can learn something from hearing an actor tell, how hard of a life it is, and it is. These actors, they will get a TV show and they won't work for a few years. So they're all just interviews, but the one's strictly entertainment, one's business, and comedy is mostly comics and comedy writers.
It's really cool that you can do all these interviews in sort of like different formats like that. Like, I imagine it doesn't really get stale for you then.
No, and I'll be honest, interviews never get stale, just because I love talking to people like that. I love the story. When I have the 80s musicians on, I start with a lot of times I'll say what one of their songs means to me. Too Shy to Shy by Kaja Gugu was a big 80s hit. Then Lamar, the singer, hears that and he tells you the story about how it came about. And I think also that when they find out that I did do comedy, they know I know the creative process. They know I know what it's like to be on stage, and that changes it a lot. I used to not bring up that I did comedy, but now I do when I have musicians, because I always say I admire people who write songs. I'm writing dick jokes and they're writing songs, and but they're like, oh, you put comedy, and so that's what makes it fun, man. I mean, how can you get bored when I just talked to a guy who started the band UB40, and he was drinking a glass of red wine. He was drinking a glass of red wine. And that was, to me, I was cracking up like, I wish I'd taken a picture. I took a picture of me and him when we were done, but I wish he'd held up the glass of red wine. But you can't get tired when you do that. It's just, it's a blast. I mean, you have fun, and that's what it's all. You do it because, you want to give awareness to people, but you do it because you have fun.
This is a lot of fun.
You get to meet cool people. I mean, I don't sit there. I know some podcasters who, they try to go for the dirt. A lot of these guys, they try to get these stories so they can get like a certain rag, like blabbermouth or something like that. But I'm like, no, man, just don't. That's, to me, that's disrespectful. But it's just, I just want to talk to the people, and I don't want to bring up sad subjects. If they bring it up, of course, I have no problem. I've talked to people, musicians and actors about their addiction problems, and I know they're fine talking about it. And I'll say to them, when did you know you had a problem? And they tell some stories, and they're fascinating. Like some of the things that happen, how, even though they weren't at rock bottom, they mentally, they felt like they hit rock bottom, even though they were still, one guy was still on a very successful TV show. But when he's supposed to go and direct, maybe doing coke all night, and blocking shots in his house, and he wouldn't show up on set. And he was a co-star of the show and directing. But so that's the stuff too. You just get a lot out of it. That's why, they're all different. The business people I love talking to, because a lot of people don't talk about that. I get a lot of all-female panels on my business show. I've had 5 all-female panels in a row, just because it's a different animal for them. People don't give them the platform they should. It's still a man's world. And I mean that, and that's, I don't know if that will change, but I think it's just, so that's why it never gets tiresome.
That's awesome. We talked a few minutes ago about what makes up a good comedian. Now that you've basically almost had like a second career, if we want to call it that, what do you think makes up a good interviewer and a good podcast?
Good interview. It's funny. I was in this magazine called Earworthy, and the guy said, very nice writer. He said, Steve Cooper may not have the name recognition of Joe Rogan or Dax Shepard, or whatever he said, but he's probably one of the best interviewers in the business. And I told him the reason is, one, I listen. Okay, I let my guests talk. It's not about me. People aren't turning into CooperTalk to hear Cooper. They're turning in to hear, Springsteen's original drummer or piano player, or, whatever 80s band, or you're an actor on a different TV show. And so I think I do my research. But I write a few notes down. I go in, I don't write questions down. I don't, because of my performing background, I want it to flow. And I feel when you're with a creative person, they have that same talent. And so I think you have to make it all about your guest, and you have to listen. No one wants to hear that people trying to be funny, or you heard shows where people do that stupid laugh. No, just be sincere. And that's what makes a good interview, just caring. Don't sit there and jump through hoops. Don't sit there and be robotic. Sit there and engage your guest, because the bottom line is it's the guest's time that came onto your show.
Right.
And as I said, all the guests I have in CooperTalk are much, 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 much bigger than me. And they're giving me their time. And it's also a moment of pride. But I think for interview, you have to listen. You have to sit there and pay attention. And if a question doesn't go the way you want it, you just got to think on your feet. You can have all the you sent me some questions, but we're not even following that script right now because you sit there, but you're going with it. So that means you know how to interview. A lot of people, they get freaked out. So I think just listen, do your research. Don't over research, because then it sounds. Don't try to write this obscure question that makes me sound bad. No, you sound like an idiot. Especially sometimes when you play these obscure questions, the guest doesn't even know what you're talking about. They forgot it was so long ago. So just write, just be prepared. Listen and care. Care about your guests. They're spending their time for you, and it will come across. And that's one thing. I've gotten so many referrals. I had all these character actors on my show because they loved doing my show, and no one was interviewing them. And they'd say, I go, hey, do you know this guy? And they go, yeah. And the next thing you know, this person's calling me. Hey, I heard you want to come down to the studio. It's because I cared, and they said, I'm a Mitch. I'm genuine, and I'm not full of it.
That's awesome. That's so cool that you could build the rapport with those people just by being a genuine person.
But they're us.
Yeah.
They're actors and musicians, but they all have their ups and downs. We know business people who have a hard time getting rejected on sales. Actors get rejected. You can have an Oscar and you'll still have to audition sometimes.
Yeah.
They get more rejection in a year than most people get in their life. Mm-hmm. And so they know, and they just like to share their stories.
Of course, yeah. And they got good stories to share.
Oh, great stories.
Speaking of stories, it's not quite a story, but you wrote a cookbook. What was okay. How did that come about?
Here's what happened. It was 13 years ago, 12 years ago. I just started dating my wife. She was in New Jersey. I was in LA. Before I met her, I had a very social party life, and I ended up getting congestive heart failure. And I was in the hospital, and the doctor said, you have to watch your sodium intake. So I didn't even have any salt in my house. And I went, you know what? I'm making these recipes up. There's no pictures in my book. They have stupid little names. And I just said, it's healthy eating with no sodium. And at the time, as I said, I was bi-coastal. I come see Joanne once a month, but I don't be here for like 5 days. So I was always by myself, and I couldn't go out to the happy hours and eat anymore because the stuff's full of sodium. I wasn't drinking when I got out of the hospital. And I was like, you can't go to the hospital and go like slug some beers. So I wasn't eating that crap food. So I just started cooking. And then I just made this cookbook because I would come back and she'd be at work during the day when I come visit her. So I just started putting it all together, and I self-published, and I might make every 2 months $5 off it. And I never even talk about it, but I'm like, yeah, that's one thing I did. I have a cookbook, and I can add that to my resume, but I don't. But because I'm like, it was so long ago. But it's just, it's always cracks me up when people find out about the book. Like when you said that about the book, I was like, man, how did you find out about that? How did you find out about that?
Well, I learned from a very smart man that you should just do enough homework. Don't do too much homework. Don't ask too many obscure questions. And I've also learned that you're only as hip as your guests.
That's, it's funny. That is a guy named Neil Boble who I had to stand up with. He lives in LA. His wife is on KCAL, which is like our Fox, like one of those local news, as she's the anchor woman. I've known them forever. I've known Neil since 1989. And we were at his place, and he's like, had really good tequila. And as my show was starting, we were sipping some tequila. And he said, I go, I need a catchphrase. And he came up with it. He He said, "You're only as hip as your guest," and it stayed the whole time. I start every show with that. Well, the Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests, and it just stuck, and it sounds good. And that also puts the onus on my guests because I already said I'm not hip, so you better be sharp, else no one's gonna notice.
You're carrying a little weight now. You got to carry this thing. I'm not that hip.
Exactly. I'm not exactly.
If people have had a good time listening to you here today, where can they find you online? You as a person and you as the podcasters.
Okay. You can go to my website, CooperTalk.net. Okay, you can find all my shows there, and there's a picture of the guests because a lot of names you won't notice, and I write about them. On YouTube, you can look up the Coop Tank, and you can watch the episodes there, or Coop's Comedy Corner. And that's also under the umbrella of Comedy Train Wreck Productions. Facebook, I'm Steve Cooper. You can also go to Cooper Talk Radio on Facebook. I have that page. If you send a friend request, I usually will accept it, unless I don't know who you are. And if you look like a fake model from another country, which I always think there's probably this really hot looking Russian girl who's sending all these friend requests and everyone's denying her. She's probably crying to her mom. She's like, I'm real. But yeah, you do that, or you can email me at CooperTalk.net. So yeah, that's the way to get in touch with it. If this airs before then, on Thursday, May 15th at Splits Bar and Grill near Luxury Lounge, I have a comedy show going. It starts at 7. On the 28th at Soundplex Studios in Merchantville, it's Cork's Comedy and Conversations. It's another comedy show I host. And the 29th, the very funny Jay Black, one of the best comedians in the area, he'll be down with me at Death of the Fox Brewing Company in Clarksboro. And you can email me or hit me up on Facebook if you want information how to get tickets. I bring in the best headliners. I host it. I put a solid show together because my name's connected to it, and I don't want to put a bad product out there.
And we'll definitely have this up before then, so people can go check you out and see what you're all about if they've enjoyed watching you here.
All right,
Steve, I really appreciate your time today. I learned even more than I did my homework a little bit, but I learned even more about you. I'm even more fascinated now, man. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, it's one other thing about us performers. A lot of us, we can't take compliments. My friends always say that. So when you compliment me, I'm like, I start to feel like a blush, like, oh God, I'm such a dick. Like, well, I don't want to accept it. But thank you for the kind words. We can like tweak and be like, man, I hope this gets 10 views. Yeah, exactly. That's fine. As long as you get one view, who cares? If you only get one view, if you love it, who cares, man?
That's right.
As long as you're doing it, and that's what people don't get. So that's one thing also. As one other thing about being a good interviewer and podcast host, don't worry about the other people. Don't worry if people aren't viewing, because if you're good, the bottom line is if you're delivering and you're enjoying it, that's all that counts. It's right. Your life and you want to enjoy it.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Steve. And I hope people watching this go out and support you at these shows coming up and following on social media, because you're a really cool guy. You got really cool stuff going on.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. It was good meeting you. And I hope I didn't wake your kids up with me talking.
So, no, we're good. We're good.
All right, man.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Adam.
Bye.